Today I'm in the company of Corrado Rovaris, music director of OperaPhiladelphia, the only producer of grand-scale opera in the city, and as indicated by the New York Times, one of the most creative and ambitious companies in this country. Born in Bergamo, Maestro Rovaris graduated from the Conservatory of Milan with degrees in composition, organ, and harpsichord. He worked in the early 1990s as the assistant chorus master of the Teatro La Scala, and after his debut on the podium with Galuppi's Il filosofo di Campagna, in his early career he conducted in Milan, Florence, Parma, Turin, Verona, Bologna, Macerata, Città di Castello, Cremona, and Pesaro, where in 1998 he inaugurated the Rossini Festival. So he made his debut with OperaPhiladelphia in 1999, conducting The Marriage of Figaro, and over the past 20 years he has presided over a striking evolution of the company, playing a key part in establishing it as one of American opera's success stories. In the early 2000s, he conducted classical operas on worldwide stages, and to mention a few, Mozart's Don Giovanni in Verona, Rossini's The Barber of Seville in Frankfurt, Turin, Bologna, and at the Teatro La Scala in Milan, Donizetti's The Elixir of Love in Reggio Emilia, Rome, Bologna, and The Italian Girl in Algiers, La Bohème, Don Pasquale, Simon Boccanegra, and many others. In 2005, he was appointed as the first music director of OperaPhiladelphia, and after the successes of Don Giovanni and La Traviata, he conducted the majority of the company's productions, while maintaining at the same time an international visibility, with acclaimed performances in Tokyo, Brussels, Lausanne, and Santa Fe. In particular, in his work at OperaPhiladelphia, Maestro Rovaris distinguished himself for his capacity to scout for singing talent, to build the orchestra and chorus, and to engage with classical and new repertoire. Among the innovations he introduced that led the Washington Post to define OperaPhiladelphia as, quote, the very model of a modern opera company, I want to point out two here. One, the American Repertoire Program, designed to foster a new generation of homegrown opera composers, and the Festival O, a 2-week immersion featuring multiple world premieres and other operatic happenings at a variety of venues across the city of Philadelphia. Maestro Rovaris was also awarded knighthood by the Order of Merit of the Italian Republic in 2015 and was honored with the Franco Abbiati Prize in 2016. So welcome to the show, and thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you for inviting me, and I'm so happy to be with you.
So today we'll focus on opera as a distinctive cultural heritage, as a production, but also as a business. First of all, a personal question. How did you get passionate about opera, and why at a certain point did you decide to move from Italy to Philadelphia?
So I was lucky enough I was born in a family where music was played every day. My father was an organist, a chorus master. He conducted what in Italy is la banda, which is a wind orchestra. And so I was born really in this kind of environment. So it was very natural for me to become a musician. I was not so in the opera field. My father was very fond of opera, so I knew the opera because they were played very often in my house. But first, when I started becoming a musician, I was more in piano, organ, but harpsichord, and so I played a lot of Baroque music, or with the organ, a lot of contemporary music. But then, step by step, when I started working in operas and discovering the life backstage and what is really to create an opera, I got really fond and I fell in love with that. And of course, the experience at La Scala was a key part of it, because when you work in an opera at the best level, you really appreciate all the details about this wonderful expression of art.
And so how is Italian opera perceived today in Italy and around the world? And in particular, what are the works that Americans love the most, and why, in your opinion?
So there is it's a little different in order to understand really the difference between Italy and, let's say, United States about opera. You have to understand that in Europe, the art is funded by the government. And here in the United States, everything is private. So that's the biggest difference. So when you have a fund from the government, your mission is not to sell tickets. It's really to give an artistic life to the city, to the state, to the region. And so of course, you want to have many people in the house, but first is really to create an artistic trajectory for the city. Here it's private, so yeah, you have to have a balance at the end of the year with the budget. So it's a completely different game. And so I learned from the beginning how important it was really every time you have a project, you have to go out and to find the money for it. And many colleagues, they tell me how you can, it's very difficult, it's not about art. I disagree, and I'm very fond of it. And when I moved here, they asked me, when I was appointed a music director, they asked me, you have to live in Philadelphia. And in the beginning, not knowing the system, it was a little surprising to me, because usually you come to work and then you go in another place. But it was a very important move, because for me it's important to be in the society of Philadelphia, to be in touch with donors all year round, and to understand also what the city needs as an artist's life. And that was really a key part in becoming really a 24/7 commitment to the city, and I love it. I'm so fond of Philadelphia and what we can do here.
And also, like you explained, a dimension of the artist also as an entrepreneur. You create value in art, but also value that has kind of a monetary component, a business component. So,
yes.
And in this sense, what makes OperaPhiladelphia unique? Why did its model succeed over the past 20 years, in your opinion?
When I arrived the first time, Philadelphia Opera was really, in that time it was called Philadelphia Opera Company, was really a lot about traditional repertoire, so the standard repertoire. And we have probably one of the most beautiful opera houses in the United States, the Academy of Music, and it was really about that. Step by step, we realized, first of all, the biggest change we had in our history was to have a new space when we built the Kimmer Center. In the Kimmer Center there is the big concert hall, there is the small concert hall called Perman, where it can be a concert hall or a little opera house. And that was the biggest change, because it allows us to introduce a new repertoire that maybe it's a smaller about orchestra, chorus, and interpreters, but it doesn't mean that it's less important. And so it was the way to test also how to play a different repertoire, maybe still in the standard repertoire, but also to see the reaction from the audience when you introduce something a little more, not really avant-garde, but really more contemporary, and also the aesthetic maybe a little different. It was the way for us to build a new audience. And so we tried from that moment to find a balance between presenting Bohème, Carmen, Traviata, but also to present something different in the smaller situation. And that was the biggest change. And then we understood what our opinion is that, in all the world, there is a component of audience getting older, to lose audience every year. If you talk with any organization in the world, they tell you the same. And so it's useless to complain without doing anything. We decided, so maybe we have to create a better link between contemporary life and opera. And so we started committing to new operas, more connected to our life, and to take care of American composers. And we created a new life in our organization.
Nice. So OperaPhiladelphia, and I read here from its mission, is committed to embracing innovation and developing opera for the 21st century, as you were saying. And its goal, and I continue the quote, is to deliver outstanding productions of traditional and new repertoire that engage our public and propel our genre forward. And I end the quote. In reading this, two questions come to mind. On the one hand, how do you innovate a classical repertoire? And on the other, how do you propel into the future a genre that seemed to have passed its golden age?
So when the opera has an advantage. In opera you have a visual aspect, but it's determined by the score, but you can really you can bring something new with that. So even if you do, let's say we did Bohème, which is a very traditional title, but we asked a wonderful director, Davide Livermore, a few years ago, but by the way, he just opened La Scala with Tosca this year, and also last year he was the director of the opening of La Scala. And we told him why we can't create a bohème who is more related, how you can link to the city with production. And he went to the Barnes Foundation and he started the visual aspect of the interpretation, taking paintings from the Barnes. It was a way to create something more actual, more related to our days. And I think it was a wonderful production. And from that moment, this production went everywhere. There is a DVD moved in Valencia. It was playing in Caracalla, in Rome, many years. So it was also a way to bring Philadelphia in the world. Mm-hmm. So this is a little example about what I mean about approaching the standard repertoire with our eyes, with contemporary eyes. And that's also the way to get a little of dust out of the opera concept. Opera is not just a museum. Opera is really, we have, and it was like that, because if we think Traviata, it was really related to describe. Now we are always talking about diversity, gender. Traviata was really about how the woman was seen in that moment. Or if you think Nabucco, it was a big statement about the history of Italy in that moment. So we have to find a way to bring that to now. And that's the way also to engage a younger audience. Otherwise, they come and it looks a little bit something too related to the past, which is important, but also they feel not attached to that. And the other thing is also that it's very easy for an artist to be in your tower and to think, oh, we are the artists and people have to come and see us. Maybe we have to think in a different way, and we have to go towards the audience. And so that's why we think all the time to do projects not in the opera house, but in other venues that we create just for the occasion.
Mm-hmm. And also this way of encountering the city or encountering dialoguing with the context is not just like a business strategy, but it's really a way to read the present through tradition that comes to us, and also to make tradition come alive again.
I completely agree.
And in a way, every form of art is a sort of like memory reinvented, depending on the context where it happens again, and it takes new meanings. So that's very valuable and interesting. Also, in the case of opera, also I'm thinking of literature or painting, every form of art. So now, walk us through a production. How do you coordinate the various aspects of a performance, and how long does it take to put it in place from the beginning to the end? Above all, what are the key strategies that you adopt as a conductor for turning a bidimensional libretto or score into a musical and theatrical event?
Yes. So usually about the practical aspect, because many times people ask me about that. Usually, for example, in Philadelphia, but it's basically a very standard pattern. All the production takes probably 5 weeks. So we have the first 2 weeks where you do only music rehearsal with the piano and the singers, and staging rehearsal with piano, singers, directors in a room. Usually the third week we move to the real opera house, and we start to be in the real space with set. And for me, I start to work with the orchestra, separated, just orchestra. And then during that week, you start to be in the house, but also to put together orchestra and singers first, and chorus without the staging. And then you go to orchestra, chorus, singers, staging without no costume, and step by step you get to the dress rehearsal where you have everything together. And that's really the magic of opera. I mean, there are so many ingredients that when you have a magic that every ingredient is at the top, it's really something unforgettable. And probably when people, it's almost impossible to have a top every time, but if you have a top every day, you don't enjoy it. So the magic has to come not every day, otherwise it's something you take for granted.
Also because like opera is a very multifaceted kind of production, it involves a lot of arts all at the same time, like scenography,
Yes.
costumes. We talked about costume design in another episode. Of course, the musicians, the composers, the librettists, and Italy is the land.
Yes, and
of
probably
librettists.
the most difficult thing about this is to create where you have a responsibility of, for example, for my music aspect, to take all the input from everyone and to get the best from everyone for one result. That's really the most difficult thing. I think that, of course, you have to know very well what you're doing, but the psychological aspect of it, it's really a huge percentage of the process.
Definitely. So, what considerations go through your head when you create a program for a season instead? And how do you diversify your audience? And at the same time, how do you stay true to your identity as an opera house? So, how does a sophisticated cultural production like opera become popular? How does it stay in business? You addressed this a little bit earlier, but I wanted you to.
Yes, because the problem is that in a big city like, for example, Philadelphia, you have not one audience. You have different audiences that you have to consider. So there are people loving the standard repertoire. They have to see. There are people that they come only to see new repertoire. There are people. So the most difficult thing for us is to, first of all, to consider the budget, because you have never to forget it, but to make it in something that it's richness for the city, presenting a little bit of everything. So maybe, for example, about the repertoire, you have an A list, a B list, a C list. About marketing, for example, you have to consider. But for example, you can't put all the A list in one season. Otherwise, the second season, what do you do? So it's really about pacing and to be careful about creating this kind of balance between what is an A title, an evergreen title, that let's say a Bohème, a Carmen, a Traviata, these kind of titles, one every year, and then you put something that is a little more sophisticated, a little less known, a little not more sophisticated, but I mean, but maybe not everyone. No, it's not because it's not more sophisticated, just that it's less known. But and then you put something new, and then you give a chance maybe to a young composer to have the first thing on stage. And we have a wonderful staff in our team that helps this. When you write for the first time an opera, you need really to be. It's not so easy to understand the process, so we have to help them to understand how to create that. We have workshops. So it's a big picture, but it's a lot of fun when you. And then, of course, you try to do the best, and then it doesn't mean that maybe it's always the best. But at least here, we really try to consider all these aspects very, very carefully.
No, definitely. Also, as a way to spread the entertainment, the cultural value over a year.
Yes.
That's like to maintain kind of a turnover.
Yes.
That's part of the business, but it's also part of the show.
Yes.
And last question. We talked a little bit about Italian culture as a rich soil for the development of opera, not only because of the language. Of course, Italian is a language that has a lot of vowels that allows an easier path into singing. And also, opera developed as an art form in the 17th century with Monteverdi in Italy, and had its golden age in the 19th century with giants like Verdi, Rossini, Puccini in the late 19th century, early 20th century. And still, Milan's Teatro La Scala is still one of the, if not the most important opera house in the world. What about now? What do you think is the future of Italian opera?
Italian opera is going to be really, I travel all over the world, and I see, like now, I was in Tokyo until 2 weeks ago, and we did Don Pasquale by Donizetti, which is but it was the first time in Tokyo, and to see the audience so surprised, but it's unbelievable how they enjoy something like that. It's going to be there forever. But still, I think we have not to take it for granted. I think we can always work about what I was saying before to give new life to these titles. In the moment we don't work towards that, I think it's very dangerous. I think we have always to think about to take the past as a richness, but to bring that in our contemporary life.
Also because tradition may become like a repository of images, forms, operas.
Which is very dangerous, what I'm saying, because, for example, there are parts of the world where they think, but we take an opera from the repertoire, And then there is a director who creates something completely disconnected with the text, and it goes because he thinks that it's more important himself than the opera, and that's really, I think, the wrong approach, because we have always to respect the text. So what is difficult? To find new ideas respecting the original purpose. That's very difficult. Right, it's very easy to say, I say something new, and then you see shows that they're not connecting at all. And it happened to me also once to have a director, but he arrived and he didn't even know the music. He never heard once the music before staging it. That's really, I think, not respectful. So it takes time to really learn something and then to find something new, but knowing what you're doing, it's not so easy. So I don't like when there is a shortcut about that.
Yeah, it's also part of like what we'll be discussing in other episodes, where innovation is not just experimenting random solutions, but really observing well something and mastering it. And this is a peculiar, I think, Italian approach to tradition as a rich soil for developing new work, new thought. And in this sense, the dialogue with audiences that are not familiar with this is actually creates a great reaction, because it allows to see the beauty of these operas as they happen for the first time, and to rediscover it rather than treating them as kind of pieces that are given or pieces of a museum.
Yes, and I think I have to say that I work with directors so good about that. We are so good about really creating something special, taking a text that has been interpreted so many times, but bringing something so new, but so related to the original purpose of the piece. I love it. There are very, very, very good directors, and many of them are really great, amazing. So I'm very confident that we can go to the future of opera really bright.
Well, thank you. This was a very interesting conversation, and we talked about a way to innovate opera as a grounded way to innovate in opera that might produce even more successful results than what has been like part of our tradition. And also we discussed about opera as a business, as an art form, where the creation of value is also not just cultural, but also kind of entrepreneurial in the sense of a business. If you're interested in the theme of opera, you can also go back to the episode 2 of the podcast in season 1, which was dedicated to the score, print, and opera patron Giulio Ricordi, and one of Italy's most famous tenors, so Enrico Caruso. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter or LinkedIn, or to subscribe to the podcast at www.italianinnovators.com or on the Italian Innovators YouTube channel. For the moment, thank you, Maestro Rovaris, for your availability and your presence with us today. And thanks everybody for listening. Arrivederci e alla prossima.